The other way. Curiosity reared its head, poking at Pippa until she consented to the temptation to peek. She stepped forward, carefully picking her way through the trees until she neared the cottage. In all her years living at Camden Court, the few times she'd inquired about the state of this cottage, she'd been met with a severe warning to stay away. The house itself was not cursed, but the man who owned it allegedly carried darkness in his heart. The man shouting orders swore loudly, and Pippa jumped. Or perhaps, if the man here today was the absent owner himself, it was less a matter of the house being cursed, and more that he cursed. So far, Pippa had heard no less than 3 disreputable words, and she'd only been eavesdropping for a small handful of minutes. Movement beyond the foliage continued, as the men, for the first had to be talking to someone, appeared to be putting up a new door, or they'd repaired the cracked wood and were now returning it to its hinges. Pippa caught the sight of a thin blonde man with his face turned away from her and wanted a better look, but she couldn't very well walk up to the men and introduce herself, not if they were really so bad as she'd been led to believe. Her reputation wouldn't thank her were she to continue to spy, but Pippa didn't care much for society's pompous ideas of what held importance. To her, fresh salty air, the rolling sound of waves, and her family were the only things which held any great importance. Choosing the perfect tree, Pippa grasped the lower branches and swung herself up, slowly making her way to the midpoint, where the branches were sturdy enough to hold her weight and high enough for her to better see Ravenwood Cottage. She wedged herself against the trunk, crossing her ankles where they hung and hoping to blend into the browns and greens around her. Her Spencer jacket matched the bark, but her blue gown would certainly be spotted if one of the men cared to look her way, unless she climbed even higher to blend with the sky. She shook the thought away. That was only likely to draw the men's attention. "Just hold it a little longer," the second man called. He remained out of sight, his voice muffled from the door. Pounding followed, and a few short minutes later, the blonde man released the door and stepped back. There appeared to be 3 men in total thus far. The oldest by a couple of decades, grey from his coat to his hair and seated on a cart barking orders, a blonde, lanky man obeying the orders, and another inside the cottage. Perhaps they intended to move into the cottage and join the community, and perhaps they had a sister Pippa's age she could befriend. The prospect excited her, and she strained to hear sounds of a woman at the pump around the back, or inside, singing as she cooked. The front door swung open, and a dark-haired man in his shirt sleeves and a waistcoat stepped through before slamming the door shut, jarring Pippa. He looked at the blonde and grinned, and Pippa was robbed of breath, her fingers gripping the bark until her knuckles turned white. Never, in all of Pippa's nearly 19 years, had she beheld a man so handsome. His startling white grin blazed even from the distance, and his dark eyebrows framed expressive eyes. She wanted to melt into the tree so she could perch from this place and watch the front of the cottage always, regardless of how mad that made her sound. Could this be madness? Or the beginning of falling in love? Pippa shook her head. Love? Obviously not. It was nothing more than strong attraction. She needed to manage her feelings before she lost all sense of control and fell to her death. She looked down at the earth, so far away, and swallowed. Well, maybe not her death, but a broken leg was a broken leg, and she could not very well find a way to meet this gentleman easily if she had a broken leg. "Get on with the shed now," the older man shouted, and the handsome dark-haired gentleman immediately stiffened. He agreed and spoke to the blonde man before walking around to the back garden of the cottage. Could he be a servant? None of the men appeared to be dressed in particularly well-made clothing, but neither were they outfitted in rags. Pippa cared not for what station he claimed, though she knew her sister might have an opinion on the matter. But it wasn't as if Pippa were thinking long-term, she merely wanted an opportunity to meet the man. Her first objective would be to discern whether or not the handsome man was married, for he appeared to be a good handful of years past 20 at least. Her second objective? Learn his name. The blonde man set to clearing away some of the ivy climbing along the stone exterior of the cottage, revealing where mortar had deteriorated and chipped away, while the older man watched, drinking from a flask he appeared to have pulled from his pocket. Minutes ticked on as the men worked, and Pippa hadn't caught sight of the dark-haired gentleman in ages. Perhaps if she scooted over on the branch a little, she would be able to see around the side of the cottage, or at least find a more comfortable position. She knew the shed to be on the east end of the back garden, and it wasn't too far. A deep voice came from below. "Do you realise that it is far easier to spy on people with the help of a telescope?" Pippa yelped, taken by surprise.